So today I'd love to welcome to the show Matt Schlegel. Matt is committed to developing highly effective, style-diverse teams and giving them tools and strategies to tackle challenges that are seemingly impossible. Principal of Schlegel Consulting, Matt started his career as an electrical engineer and soon realized that successful project outcomes depend on leading people than leading electrons. Matt discovered a powerful system called Enneagram. I knew I'd murder that again, even though I said it once before, and used it to develop a novel set of tools, strategies, and applications for team effectiveness that he uses in his consulting practice and shares in his book, as you can see on the screen if you're watching, Teamwork 9.0. So Matt, welcome. Apologies for crucifying your name and for crucifying your tool that you use. Tell us a bit about you.
Well, we're starting off. I'm feeling very crucified. No, thank you so much, Nigel, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about this.
Brilliant. Well, tell us a little bit about you, a bit more richer background. Where are you? I think from your accent, people will probably be able to guess the country that you're from.
Yes, and the state is California, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Nice. And where I was, pretty much born and raised, stayed in California for college, did end up going to and lived in Japan for 3 years before returning back to California, and have been here ever since. Wife, 3 kids, living the dream.
Brilliant. I'd love to talk to you about Tokyo as well, maybe later.
Yeah.
Not Tokyo, about Japan. It's on my bucket list. That's the top of my bucket list has always been there to head over to Japan.
It's fascinating place.
Yeah, brilliant. So, obviously, tell us a little bit about how you got into what you're doing. Obviously, you mentioned that you were an electrical engineer, and then you've gone into team. How did that come about? How did that all work?
Right. So I was just going along in my career as an electrical engineer, and at some point my boss came to me and said, "Hey, I would like you to lead a team on a project." And I'm like, "I know nothing about leading people." And he said, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." Pardon me?
It's an unusual story, that.
Yeah. And I wasn't fine. I tend to worry. And I was like, well, I'm not prepared to lead people. So I just started studying, books on leadership and teamwork and learning different tools. And, and I took it very seriously because I wanted to do a good job at it. And by the time I came across this tool called the Enneagram, I'd already been familiarized with, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Strength Finders. There's a bunch of, teamwork tools that are commonly used. And my engineering brain, it always approaches these things with a lot of skepticism. And, I kind of take them apart and put them back together and just see, what's good about them and what's not good about them. And when I started to do that with the Enneagram, I just became more and more fascinated with it because the more I took it apart, the deeper it wanted to take me. And I found that it was much better at helping me understand team dynamics, on my team, the relationships between people on the team and the types of conflicts that happen between the different people. The Enneagram really shed a lot of light on it. And so as I used it more and became more fascinated with it, I started to ask other questions. It's like, why is the Enneagram numbers? Not letters or colors or animal names or, and it turns out there's a reason for that. It is, it tells an order. So there's an order 1 through 9 of how people work together to solve problems. So the Enneagram isn't just this personality system as it's commonly known. it's also a human problem-solving system.
Yeah.
And, I discovered this about it by reading these old texts about using it in that way. And I'm like, nobody knows about this. And that's what compelled me to write my book. It's not a book about the Enneagram per se. There's a lot of books about the Enneagram. My book focuses on how do you take this tool and apply it to getting teams to move through this process to solve big, challenging problems. And I did that with my team at work, and it was so successful that I decided to just break out and start a consulting practice around it. And I've been doing that for about 15 years now, and ended up writing the book just to, explain that aspect of the Enneagram, and then share, some fun anecdotes of all the different, team dynamics I've seen along the way.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned DISC and Myers-Briggs, and there's Belbin, and I had I've had someone talking on DISC, and I'm a big fan of DISC, love of DISC, because it's very simple, and that's quite good for me. I need simple. And looking at the other one with I had Ruth Pierce on talking about positive personality profiles as well. Not positive. Sorry, forgive me, Ruth. I've forgotten the name of your book. Anyway, but it's the one. It's again about. You mentioned it a minute ago. I'm going to
Myers-Briggs.
No, I'll remember it in a minute. It'll be okay.
Strength finders.
It's the strengths. It's the positive strengths. It's project strengths and things like that, and using those for teams. And I find that whole area from when I was 18, 16, 17, 18, doing organization and the environment and environmental as part of my business studies. We did motivation and went back to the Hertzberg and all those guys, and all from get go on that, I went, that's really fascinating. Understand why people do what they do, and how you as a person interfacing with them has always been something that just absolutely fascinates me. I just find every time I look at it, and it's kind of, and I talk about DISC with friends and colleagues, and kind of say, well, you've got two ends of those spectrums, and we'll get into some details in this, maybe compare and contrast some of these things. The fact that it's really good to find out why someone thinks you're a dickhead, because they're at that opposite end, and then you realize, and that's why you'd think they're that, and then you just go, the penny drops, doesn't it? And you go, that's why I'm always at odds with this person. It's not because of them, it's not because of me, it's because of that combination of us. And exactly. And
then once you understand that and you realize what's going on there, you can rise above it.
Yeah, you can adapt, can't you? And you can, because the only thing I think the thing, there's, I'm sure you've heard of it, there's a podcast called Manager Tools, and the way they talk about it is the fact that you can't change someone else's behavior. The only thing you can change is yours and how your reactions, isn't it? It's someone pokes you with an umbrella, you decide to get angry. They didn't make you angry. And it's the same. If someone sends you a snotty email in a style that doesn't fit with your character, you decide to get angry. It isn't them. Or you can decide not to. And step back, or get angry and then step back, think, count to 10, and then go back in. And and it's how we do that. And it's hard to do. It's very hard to do, I find.
Yeah, there's I read a book, I think it's called Whole Brain Living by Jill Bolt Taylor. And in it, she talked about the 90-second rule. In other words, when you have that reaction, you read that email that, that provokes some reaction in you. She says that the chemicals in your brain that are released, they only persist for 90 seconds. And the only reason why they persist for longer than 90 seconds is you keep thinking about it. If you keep thinking about it, you just keep resetting that 90 seconds. But if you actually give yourself a timeout to stand up, walk away, listen to some music, go have a conversation with somebody else, within 90 seconds, those chemicals in your brain will dissipate, and you'll be back in your provoked state.
Yeah, so it's like that whole thing where people advise that, right, if you're going to write an email when you're angry, fine, write it, get it out your system, leave it. The following day, then read it, and how many times you do that, and you go, I can't. You wouldn't send that email. That's the one.
But it feels so good to write it.
Though. Yeah. Gets all of that out without getting out. It's like you say, you're not choosing to react to the person. You're deflecting away from that person, right. Aren't you? And kind of, just as you say, this is what I would have said had I not been someone who wanted to mix with other adults at the same time. And it's kind of what it is. And it's a choice between being able to mix with other people by not saying exactly what you think immediately, and because that can sometimes we all do it though, so I suppose it's quite interesting when that happens.
Yes indeed.
So talk us through about how I'm going to get the name right. An Enneagram,
yeah.
Enneagram, right? I'm going to kind of put it in my head. How that works and what it is, and just a little bit of outline about that, because I'll be frank, when we spoke about this, and it's the first time I'd ever heard of it.
Okay.
It's one that's not ever bubbled up to my radar, and I'm sure that's common of a lot of these type of tools. Yeah. Some of the ones I've talked to people about, and they're sitting on not got a clue what I'm talking about either. So it's kind of it's interesting. It doesn't. Not all of them are known by everyone. So talk a little bit around the background.
Yeah. At a high level, it's it talks about, so Ennea in Greek means 9, right. And so it's 9 types. And if you see the symbol for the diagram of the Enneagram, it's a circle with 9 numbers around it and a bunch of lines connecting the numbers in between. And and one of the great things about the Enneagram, and you've already mentioned this, is that it really speaks to underlying motivation.
Right.
And it also speaks to these responses that we're going to have. Are we going to respond with anger? Are we going to respond with anxiety? Are we going to respond with more of a grief or shame response? So it speaks to those responses as well. And one of the things I really like about the Enneagram, as opposed to some of these other systems, is that it speaks to dynamics, because our behaviors change depending on how we're feeling, and if we're relaxed and calm versus we're up against a deadline and stressed out. We're going to behave in different ways, and the Enneagram actually tells us, and those are what those lines are in the middle. There's the lines of stress or security, and as you move towards stress, you are going to behave more like one type, and then when you're in security, you're going to behave another type. So, like for instance, my core type is type 6. And when I'm in my stressed out situation, I move to 3. And when I'm in my relaxed situation, I move to 9, right? And the underlying, and I'll back out a little bit, so even though there's 9 types, you can also think of it as 3 groups of 3. And there's an underlying motivator for each one of these groups of 3.
Yeah.
And so the driver for the 8, the 9, and the 1 is anger. And the driver for the 5, the 6, and the 7 is anxiety. And the driver for the 2, 3, and 4 is feelings. So you have these 3 drivers, and then as we move into situations, those drivers will induce us to respond in certain ways.
Yeah.
And it speaks to that underlying motivation. So for instance, let's take type 1. Type 1 is in that anger group, and they're called the internal anger. So and there's three states. You can have external anger, internal anger, or suppressed anger.
Yep.
And the internal anger, the one, has this angry voice in their head saying, that's not right. It shouldn't be like that. It should be like this. And you need to work hard to make sure that you fix it and make it like this. And that's what your brain is just constantly telling you. And that speaks to that underlying motivation of the type that's often called the perfectionist, because they just drive to get all the details exactly right. So, each one of these types has, a different but unique underlying motivator that speaks to what's going on in their life and why they're behaving and responding in certain ways. And and I was saying I'm a type 6, so I'm in the anxiety group. And the way I'm suppressed anxiety. So I'm in the center of that anxiety group. And the way I keep my anxiety down is, if I know what's going to happen, my anxiety goes away. As soon as it's like things aren't going as planned and, things are getting chaotic, then I can feel my anxiety come up. And when my anxiety comes up, then what I do is I start working harder and harder and harder to check off and tick off all the things on the list that I need to do. And then when I tick them all off, then my anxiety goes back down again.
It's that level of control, isn't it?
Yes. And so that makes me look, when I'm in that state, that stressed out state, my 6ness makes me look like a 3. So I'm connected to the 3. And then when my anxiety dissipates and I don't have to worry about things, I'm on vacation, then my anxiety goes away, and then I look like the calm, relaxed type 9. And so that's one of the things I love about the Enneagram, is that it explains these dynamics and our changes in behaviors depending on our stress state.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and I'm just obviously with me, I'm drawing parallels with the DISC model that we talk about there, and there's some commonality there in a similar sort of thinking, isn't it? In the fact that it's that what behaviors but it's more internal, isn't it? Because typically on a lot of them, it's the behaviors you exhibit rather than, but not necessarily what the internal things that are going on. As you say there, that's kind of, I can understand that if someone who is comfortable when things are all the ship sailing fine, when it's not, sometimes you probably aim at controlling things that are uncontrollable, isn't it? And that drive to try to control the uncontrollable. And with project managers, anyone who's listening to this, that we're kind of can be like that quite often. It's that control. Sometimes you've got to not be in control in order to let things go the right way. And with a team, especially, I imagine as team leadership, I imagine in that, because that's really interesting, that the fact that you talk about the lines as well. And I'm guessing those are interactions, and where those lines, how does that work? Is it that when you've got the lines of a 9 and a 3 working together, that's where you'll get a clash? Is that the kind of thing that kind of comes out of it?
There I have found the lines can speak to that as well. For instance, if you look at the Enneagram diagram, you'll see that there is a triangle in the middle, and it connects the 3, the 6, and the 9.
Right. Yeah.
And so that makes up a group of 3 that actually works very well together. And and in my book, I call these the work team triads, because I see certain groups of 3 often coming together and working together, very, very well. And so the 3 groups are the 1, the 4, and the 7, the 2, the 5, and the 8, and the 3 and the 6 and the 9. And I call them the 1, 4, and 7. I call the startup triad, because they're the ones who want to go off and do something brand new, and and maybe invent something. I see a lot of 1, 4s, and 7s in startup companies here in Silicon Valley. So that's that kind of dynamic. And then the 2, the 5, and the 8, I call them the industrious triad, because they love to come together and just get stuff done. They're just like, they're like the operations group. They just love making stuff and doing that, and they work well together to do that. And then the 3, the 6, and the 9, I call the systematizing group, because what they like to do is like create these structures where all of these things are working together very well, right? So you'll have your product development team of 1, 4s, and 7s, and you'll have your operations teams of 2, 5s, and 8s, and then you get all of this in place and get it working, and that's that role of the systematizing group.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And you find that as people move through their careers, they tend to migrate to these roles that are suitable for them. It's like,
I suppose if you're working, it's a typical thing. If you're working against your natural tendencies in another role, you might be very skilled at it, but you're not necessarily naturally fit in that. Funny, which throws me back to many years ago, 20, 30, 20, nearly 30 years ago, when I had a psychometric test for an interview. That was way back when people used to do lots of psychometric tests. Actually, it was quite a junior role that I was going for, and though really intriguing and interesting, because they gave me the results, and obviously it's just, and it kind of summarized me. And at the time I was working as an accountant, and it summarized me as being highly capable in the role that he's doing, but not naturally fitted to what he was doing. And
interesting.
And it's that kind of talks to what you're saying there. If you've got someone working in that product group who's someone who's really about systemizing, they're going to want to try and put some structure around it, and maybe that's where some of the innovation tooling and innovation tools and techniques, there's been someone who's been in there go, how can we do this just at the seat of our pants? We should put process in. So maybe they're good in some ways, but it kind of, I can see how that can happen. And from a project point of view, I see quite often people saying, right, a project manager needs to be this kind of person. And quite often I sit there looking at certain projects, and me, again, I draw from my thing, that the startup of a project I enjoy. I get going, it's getting new customers, understand what we're doing, getting everything going, it's all kind of,
right.
The end of it, I can enjoy that as well, where we're all getting together, as long as it's not too stressful and we're trying to push it over the line.
Yeah.
But that bit in the middle, whilst I can understand it, I can get a little bit bored. I can get a little bit, and it's probably not, and I can be not as a spot on with it, and there's probably people better than me. And sometimes you think, if you're going to run a project and it's big enough, rather than having a project manager that runs the end-to-end project, which is what we all tend to do, you get your project, you deliver it to the end. Right. Actually, do you go, right, we need to kick this project off. We need the 147s, get them in there, get it started. They'll work out, get the team together, started. Then we bring in the 2, 5, and 8 who have got to, they would probably come in at the end, where it's like all hands to the deck, charge, push it through. And the 3, 6, and 9s are in the middle, where that make sure we're hitting the mark, hitting everything as we go along. And it's kind of, but we don't structure projects like that. We go, project manager A, you're doing it all the way through.
Right.
And that's where you'll see it. You can see it with different project managers, that certain parts of the process, some people I know, with a beginning of a project, with the ambiguity that you get, they hate it and they really struggle, because they're just trying to wrestle this thing into something completely clear. And actually, sometimes you've got to go through a period of time where you're not going to get it.
Right. And that's where the 1s and the 4s and the 7s, that's where they love being. Right. So you're spot on there. It's certain types are really drawn to certain situations and repelled, and others are repelled by those same situations, right? And so if you can, and I talk about this in the book, I call it shared leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It's because as you're working through the process, certain types are going to be more suited. And this is I'll tell you the punchline, right? So the Enneagram is this 9-step system, and it just happens that there are also these 9 personality types, one suited for each step in problem solving. So if you know where you are in the problem solving process, then you'll know what personality dynamic is best suited for that. And then I even will go into, because all types have access to all the other types.
Yeah.
We all do. It's just with more or less ease.
Yeah.
Right. And, so of course I'm a 6. So I know I have access to my type 6. And I've already told you I have access to the 9 and the 3. And I also have access to what are called the wings, the types on either side of me. So I also have access to the 5 and the 7. But say the 2 is going to be a little harder for me, right? And that's just what it is. So if we're at a step in the process that requires the 2 dynamic, then it's better for me to find a 2, partner with them, and then have them lead during that phase, rather than me trying to force a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, it's pretty. It lines up with all the sort of things that I've seen and used quite well with the disc, because with the disc stuff I was a high I, and I had team members working for me on my architecture team who was a high C, and we worked really well together because I was happy to fly by the seat of my pants a little bit. He wasn't, and he'd kind of go, "You can't do that. Come up," and he would be my conscience, but I would be his sort of risk taker. I would get him to take more risks than he would do, and we kind of together we balanced out quite well in that sort of scenario. Like some simple things, like he would send me a document to approve, and the email would say, "Can you approve this?" And there's a lot of detail, there's a big document, I just send back approved 2 seconds later, and he comes to me going, you haven't read it. And I said, no. Why haven't you read it? Because it'll be right. How do you know that? Well, you've done it. You're better at this than me. You're more diligent than me. There's no way I will add any more diligence to it. I just need to trust you, and I'm approving it because I'm just in the hierarchical bullshit that we have in the organization, because you're better at that than me. And it's kind of it's realizing who is better than you, and accepting that in a given situation. And it's not better as in more value. It's in a given situation, stepping back. As a leader as well, I think it's important, isn't it? Is if you've got members of your team who are going to do part of the role better than you, let them do it. Step back and say, look, they're going to be better than me. They can do it, and they'll get the credit for it. Not get them to do it for you and step. But they did that. They did a brilliant job of it. Right. They're better at it than me. Right. And I think it's and it can be difficult to do. It's just quite an ego thing to do. There is because we try to. There's that perception of all of us with all of the skills to be whatever they are, and try to bring them all up to the brilliant level, rather than pick the ones that maybe fit with your number in there, maybe you're 6, and go, right, that's where I am suited, and that's where my strengths are, and therefore work on those and make me an amazing one of those, rather than an average one, quite a good one of those, isn't it? And it's kind of and again, that's difficult because societal, it's kind of, they say, right, you need to be good at all of these things. I don't think it works exactly for me.
Exactly. Very well said.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've used this in consulting and lots of different places and different organizations, and you hinted on some stories within your book. Give us a bit of a view of how you've used this sort of in a practical sense, in a sort of example, if you can share something that just kind of just bring it to life, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I'll often get hired by leaders who are, having some, issue in the organization that requires the team to work, on the system rather than in the system.
Yep.
So, everybody's, coming to work and doing their thing and chugging along. And usually that works really well. But sometimes, there's, something happens that requires people to have to rethink the way they're working together.
Yeah.
And then, and people, that's not their main job. Right? And not everybody is equipped to kind of pop out of, the daily reality of how they're operating and saying, let's work together and figure out a new way to work together to solve these problems and become more effective. So I'll get hired by, a CEO, or a group leader who recognizes that this is happening, and they'll bring me in to essentially facilitate. And I often get, hired by type 8s, type 3s, and type 7s. So these are the common types that tend to hire me. And it's often because they are focused more externally rather than internally. And, and they're counting on their team to do their stuff so that they can, focus on, clients or, working with other groups in the organization or whatever. And so, I'll get hired to, by, and I'm going to give an example of a type 8. Now, type 8 they are, they're often called the asserter. So it's one of the more assertive types. And they do tend to rise to leadership roles. A lot of CEOs, for instance, are 8s. So, and they're in that anger group as well, along with the 1s, and they're the external anger. Yep. In other words, they're pretty comfortable raising their voice and saying, "Hey, go do that." That's their style, and it works really well. They raise their voice, and people say, "Oh, okay, I'll go do it." The problem comes is that they have this strong sense of intuition of what to do.
Yep.
And so they don't really have to think about it. The anger group's also called the intuitive group. So they just kind of know what to do, and they want to just get to action because they kind of already know what to do.
Yeah.
And so they kind of get into the habit of just telling their folks, go do this, go do that, go do this. And guess what? People do it. The problem comes is that when the type 8 leader is trying to grow beyond just controlling their own group, that they get to a point where they need the group to think for itself and solve problems for itself. But they've trained their group to just wait to be told what to do. And so the 8 will complain to me and say, they just never take initiative. They just never do things on themselves. I don't know why they don't do things for themselves. Yeah. I know why, because they've trained them to do that.
Yeah. So that's like with your children, isn't it, as well? If you every time your child needs some help with something, you say and do solve the problem, or you just tell them what to do. That's what they learn, isn't it? And it's
that's right.
And we continue to learn that through life. It's not just as a kid, it's as a human. You just, that's what I'm meant to be doing. Fine, that's how it is. And then you turn off the processing for other stuff because I don't need that because I've got enough processing to do with everything else.
Right. So when I'm working with these type 8 leaders, I'll say, okay, allow me to facilitate a conversation in your group. I am going to take them through this 9-step process. I'll keep you posted as we move through, but we're going to focus on solving this problem that you've identified, and that's step one of identifying the problem and setting the goals. And then I'll move them through all those steps. It's going to take some time because they don't intuitively know what to do. They actually have to work through it to come up with a solution. Yeah. They'll get to step 7. They'll present to you what they want to do. And then, once you've reviewed and approved that, then they'll go off and do it. And the type 8 leader will say, great, yeah, go do that. So now what I'm doing is I'm now getting the team to start to exercise those muscles that have atrophied and get them to work together to solve this problem. And really something magical happens when I do this with folks, Nigel. When they all get together and they explain the problem from their perspective, you can see these light bulbs go off where they're like, oh, it's not your fault or your fault that this is happening. It's because of this other bigger thing that's causing it. We're all just looking at the same problem from our different perspectives, but it's all the problem. It's not us.
Yeah.
And I see the light bulbs go on, and then you just like sense this excitement in the group. And then they start to formulate, what they want the world to look like when the problem is solved. And then I move them through, step 2, make sure you have all the team members. Step 3, come up with some ideas. Step 4, choose the best ideas. Step 5, validate them. Step 6, build a plan around them. Step 7, build a presentation about the plan and show it to the CEO. And they do that, and they present to the CEO, and the CEO's like, yeah, go do it.
Yeah.
And the other great thing about it is now the team is just vested in making it happen, right? Because it's theirs now. It's not just them being told what to do. It's this is what they want to do. And it's going to solve the problem. And the CEO or the type 8 leader, they're going to be fine with it. They just want it to be done. And it will happen. And when I take teams through this, the solutions that they come up with, not only are they creative and very effective, but they're very persistent, because this process just has buy-in built into it all the way through. So when you get to the end and they implement it, everybody's pretty much on board and happy with the results.
Yeah.
So it's just so much fun to work through this with teams.
Yeah, I can see how that those scenarios, it's if they've been stifled and held back from having that creativity, stepping out and doing it. And I suppose I've been in the same situation myself. It's kind of like, well, I can't do anything about it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not given the mandate to do it, and I've been in that situation where I'll sit back, but then I suppose it depends on the scaling of it, doesn't it? It's where you get to a point where you've got a team, and I suppose how does, as independent to work on a problem, you've got to be able to make changes within that team, haven't you? If it's within your own team and making it and adapting it, that's fine. It's when you start stepping outside of your own team area that starts to become more difficult, I suppose, with that problem solving. You can solve the problem, but making the change happen then becomes above the pay grade, doesn't it, sometimes? And it can, and I suppose that puts you in that situation where you can sometimes get people bouncing up with lots of ideas of how to solve problems, coming up with that, and then if they're falling on deaf ears, or the organization or the manager is kind of, oh, don't bother with that, do it this way, it's quicker, that slows it down, and it stifles that creativity. And innovation and creativity is a thing that all organizations are going, right, we want our staff to be entrepreneurial, innovative, etc. And it's kind of having that framework and capability to allow people to do that.
Right.
And
having that executive sponsor, right? Because if somebody in the organization in a leadership role has to, be a sponsor for that initiative, right?
Yeah.
To, say, team, work together and go solve this challenge for the organization. Otherwise, if there isn't a sponsor, then you're right. That, the problems will just persist, and people bring them up and they fall on deaf ears. In fact, I called that in one company I worked with, and you when you see the types, because organizations kind of have a personality as well.
Yeah.
And so I've seen like type 8, really assertive organizations, or type 1, just very analytical and detail oriented, so and these organizations tend to hire a lot of people like themselves. But the problem is that when you do that, you get lopsided in your ability to solve problems too. And the team, where I was brought in by a type 7, it was a type 7 CEO. They really didn't have a strong type 1, which is type 1 is the one who points out the problem.
Yeah.
So there were problems, just nobody brought them up. And I called that sweeping problems under the rug. Yeah. So they just sweep it under the rug, just built up under there until the CEO is getting calls from clients saying, this isn't working right for me. You need to do something about it. That's when the CEO is going, okay, we need to bring in Matt to work on this.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? I suppose it's that rebalancing. Unless you understand these roles and put people in the right positions, it's not going to work. So.
Right, and as a consultant, and even though I'm not a type 1, I'm familiar enough, and I have this framework that I can identify pretty quickly what the issue is, and then even though there might not be type 1s, I can get people to, be the type 1. At least play that role for a while to. Just enter into that role, perform what needs to happen there so that we can move on to the other steps. And that's one of the things that I do in my facilitating, is just identify what's missing and then make sure that we all step into that wholeheartedly and do it for a while to make sure that it's taken care of.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I get that. It's I look at teams I've worked with and about trying to do change in problem solving, because obviously that and part of it is that continuous improvement of an organization, of a team. Right. Yeah. And looking at ways to do that. And I've done it wrong many times, and it's been all right at other times. And I think it's really useful to have some kind of structure of how to do it. And for myself, I've been trying some of the agile techniques, using agile to use that as a methodology, because I think it's fairly simple, it's fairly straightforward, and it gives a bit of a structure around it that's not too strained. And then when you've got teams that are busy with the day job, as you said before, but you've got this other change on top of it, you can set your own expectations and you can understand it. But then as a team, you can sit there and go, right, what are our big list of problems?
Yeah.
And actually take that time out and go, if you had the perfect role, how would everything work?
Yeah.
And kind of go, right, what's that? Right, there's this problem, there's this, well, this doesn't work. And they say that, kind of lift the carpet up and go, come on, guys, I don't care what it is. Let's get it all out. Right? Let's get it in a list, and let's talk about it together and agree whether it's something that's important, urgent, and let's get on with it. And then right, and now how do we solve it? And that's kind of that, and that's how the kind of approach that I've taken. And I think it sounds useful, the way that you've got those steps through it.
Right.
It's a bit more formality around it, but it sounds like a really good way of doing it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, because I look at the Enneagram problem solving process as kind of the, it's a framework, and that you can use, that's really tuned for the human dynamics. Yeah. And I'll look at other methodologies for solving problems, And they may have more steps or fewer steps than type or 9 steps, right? But one thing that I really see missing in other problem-solving methodologies is that feeling component. Most methodologies don't take into account the emotional connection in problem solving, and by minimizing that or just skipping those steps, you end up with results that aren't going to be satisfactory to everybody at the end of the day.
Yeah, when you say the emotion, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
Yeah, so there's there's like I said, the steps 2, 3, and 4. The 2, 3, and 4 are the feeling types. Right. And so when you're in steps 2, 3, and 4 of problem solving, you're in an emotional state. You're tapping into your feelings. Yeah. So let me give you so just really practically speaking, step 2 is who cares about the problem? Who cares? Right? You should identify everybody who cares about this problem, who has an emotional connection with the problem, because those are your stakeholders. And, if you exclude stakeholders, people who care about the problem, and you just charge ahead and think you're solving the problem without keeping them in the loop or directly involving them, you're going to get to the end and they will have had a completely different experience with that problem, and your solution might not address that. So they'll be completely unhappy. Yeah. So you really do need to focus on step 2 of making sure you include everybody who cares, right? So that's 2. Step 3 is the ideation, right? And as soon as somebody actually cares about a problem, they automatically start having ideas about it. Just boom, 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 boom. They'll just start, so that's a natural thing that happens, and that is step 3. And we all can get into that step where we're brainstorming different ideas, right? Yeah. So that's essentially an emotional reaction to caring, is coming up with ideas. Now, one, we tend to have a lot of emotional vesting in our own ideas. So we have to be aware and cognizant of that. And we need to be inclusive of everybody's ideas. And that's what I do in my ideation section, is I will just make sure, without any judgment at all, just collect everybody's ideas. Yeah. Now, when I throw out an idea, you're going to have this instantaneous reaction to that. You're going to say, "Oh, that idea is great," or "Ooh, that idea sucks," right? You're not thinking at all. It's just a feeling you have. Yeah. And so that's step 4. Step 4 is the emotional reaction that you have to every idea. And so when I'm doing the ideation sessions, and as you know, right, if somebody starts to interject negativity into an ideation session, it will shut it down. Yeah, so I coach everybody right at the beginning, we're going to be throwing out ideas. We're just going to be collecting ideas, and you are going to have negative reactions to some of the ideas. Yeah. Just be aware you're going to have a negative reaction, and what I want you to do is jujitsu. I want you to take whatever negative reaction that you're having to that idea, and then think about what would be the positive counter idea to that, and throw that idea out. Yeah. So you're just throwing out ideas, no judgment. And so I get people to kind of rechannel their negative energy or negative feelings towards a positive idea, a positive from their perspective, right? And then how I finally get the group through all of this is, one, I wait a day and just let the emotions go back down. And then I list out all the ideas, and then I have people just rank them.
Yeah.
And we end up, doing a rank score of the different ideas to solve the problem. And then we democratically choose, the top few that we want to carry into the next step 5, where you validate the ideas. And I find that, doing it that way, it's recognizing the emotional aspect of problem solving, and it's, and it's essentially building on it and, applying it to get the best possible ideas out of the team.
Yeah, I like that. I was just tying that to some work that we did 6 weeks ago, something like that, where I was talking to my team. We were looking at the continuous improvement things and coming up with the ideas. And the way that I tend to do that is that what is a problem? So it was more about what are problems to you, which when they're problems to people, that's less of emotion to anyone else, because if it's a problem, generally people will go, oh yeah, that I like that one. And the way that we did it is the old post-it note. Do the post-it note, write it down, stick it on the wall, and then when we've done that, then we went through the process of going through, like, explain that. Whose is this? Explain it. Tell us about it. And then kind of get a conversation around it, and then go, right, okay, what kind of grouping does that? Is it important? Does everyone think it's important, and do that? And we kind of did it quite compressed. And I like the fact that although there is less emotion in what we'd have there, splitting it over the 2 days, we did eventually go through a thing of revalidating it probably a week later. And our views did change from the initial groupings of it and things like that. And now I think that just immediately thinking, right, some of these we've got to go, right, how do we solve this problem here? How do we want to solve it? In this case of, right, let's take them one at a time. Let's do right, brainstorm, as you say, right, how could we solve it? Bang, 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 right, we could solve it this way. And some of them are actions to do. We need to do this, or we need to do that already. So we've already got a solution. But the ones where we haven't, kind of working out different options and then putting it together. I like the way that, it's really, I'm going to steal that and use that in the next week.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, it's really good. I just think we've been running for a while now. Is there anything that that you think that we haven't talked about that you think, well, actually, I would have liked to have talked about that you want to mention?
Well, one of the things, we've been talking about the Enneagram as a teamwork, tool and framework, and we focus less on the Enneagram as a tool for, personal growth and self-discovery, and it's very, very powerful for that as well, and I've gone through this journey myself, and one of the things that you do come away with is how you fit into the team, and how you contribute maximally to this overall success of the team. So as a type 6, and now I know, type 6, I have my strengths, I have my weaknesses, but now I know that I'm designed exactly the way I was supposed to be designed for that particular role in problem solving. So it's very, I don't know, it gives you a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Once you understand that about yourself, and it just gives you a better appreciation. If you're ever feeling, I wish I could do that better or this better, then you can always go back to say, but I always know I do this great. right?
Yeah.
It kind of gives you this sense of purpose that I find very satisfying and fulfilling with knowing the Enneagram from that personality side. So I encourage people to, if they haven't already, to check out the Enneagram. And I do, on my website, I have a complimentary Enneagram assessment.
Right, cool.
That they can take. And I advise people who do take the assessment, everybody scores high on, 2 or 3 different numbers. And for instance, the first time I took it, I scored highest on type 8, that asserter, because I was in an environment where I had to be assertive. So I was saying, yeah, I do that, I do that, I do that. I'm not a type 8, I'm a type 6. But, so you just have to realize that, you will score highly on a few types, which is fine. But then you have to kind of ask yourself, look at those underlying motivators for each of the types and say, which one really is my true motivating driver? And that will help you get to your core type. So it's a great journey to be on.
Yeah, it sounds, I can understand that. I remember when I was filling in things for the bell bin and things like that, where you sit there and go, and you kind of, as you say, you're not, that's the weakness of these kind of things in some ways, is you're not always honest with yourself, because we are different place at a different time, aren't we? And,
right. Exactly.
Being able to sit back and go, hang on, at the moment I'm doing loads of this. Actually, would I normally be? Is it just because of this project? That's a good idea.
Exactly.
So I guess is it at evolutionaryteams.com that they can get
yes.
get access to that? Yeah, brilliant.
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
You.
So that'll be in the link. So we're coming up on the hour now, and I think that's been a fantastic talk. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you, Nigel.
Really interesting. If people want to continue the conversation, get in touch, what's the best thing for them to do?
Yeah, well, you can find me at evolutionaryteams.com. My contact information is there. Welcome a conversation. If they want to check out the book Teamwork 9.0, that's available on Amazon. And, we'd love to get, feedback on what they think about it, and if they're applying some of the ideas in it in the workplace. I'd love to hear their stories.
Brilliant. Cool. Well, again, thank you, Matt. It's been really interesting. I'm going to check out the website and do my own assessment and see what I am. I'd be
Very
curious.
good.
I'm always curious on these sort of things, so I'll try and be honest with my answers as well, rather than the one I want to be. Rather than one I always find is sometimes you look and think, well, I reckon if I take that, that'll make me that, and I want to be that, and it's kind of like
right, exactly.
But I think they're designed to wheedle out people like me. I'm not that bright. So it's thank you for coming on the show, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and look after yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Nigel. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.